When I think of Thanksgiving, what comes to mind is not thankfulness or a big turkey. What I think of is far more important and serious. Every year at the end of November, families all across the United States celebrate the Thanksgiving holiday. This occasion has evolved into a time of expressing gratitude and sharing a bountiful meal with family. Relatives have awkward conversations while a huge turkey is scarfed down around a table. When I was in grade school, my history books depicted the first Thanksgiving meal as a peaceful gathering between white European settlers and Native American people. But there is a lesser-known truth behind this narrative. This Thanksgiving origin story that I was taught in school was a revisionist and whitewashed version of what actually happened. Following the arrival of Christopher Columbus on the shores of America in 1492, a steady stream of white European families traveled across the Atlantic Ocean to settle in this new territory. At first, they were ill-equipped to handle the harsh realities of its wilderness and climate. But indigenous tribes fed them and taught them how to grow corn and other crops to live on the land. Then, everything took a turn for the worse. This is where the revisionist whitewashing in this story happens, because it was not a peaceful coexistence between Native American tribes and white colonial settlers. Empowered by their religious beliefs and a racist disdain for the indigenous tribes, white European settlers murdered and stole from the indigenous communities who had been thriving on this land for thousands of years and multiple generations. These colonial settlers destroyed indigenous cultures by eradicating them, and even sold captive tribal members off to slavery. This brutal and racist genocide continued throughout the expansion of the United States westward to the Pacific Ocean. Five-term governor of Plymouth Colony, William Bradford, described Native Americans as savage people who are cruel, barbarous, and most treacherous. At every level, the settlers were intent on vilifying and disempowering indigenous people. Thanksgiving has been whitewashed as a symbol of kind gratitude expressed by the white European settlers toward native tribes. This revisionist history only serves to silence the stories and voices of the millions of indigenous people who were slaughtered under a heartless and cruel colonialist agenda. Since 1970, the United American Indians of New England have carried out a national day of mourning during the U.S. Thanksgiving holiday. This is what they have to say about it. Thanksgiving Day is a reminder of the genocide of millions of Native people, the theft of Native lands, and the relentless assault on Native culture. Participants in National Day of Mourning honor Native ancestors and the struggles of Native peoples to survive today. It is a day of remembrance and spiritual connection, as well as a protest of the racism and oppression which Native Americans continue to experience. As you enjoy your turkey over Thanksgiving, you have the power to acknowledge the impossibly sad and deeper truth behind the occasion. Talk about it and share this truth, or perhaps do not even celebrate the holiday at all. People often say that ignorance is bliss. I would take this a step further and say that ignorance is a complete lack of compassion. We need more compassion in the world. Compassion toward the indigenous survivors who continue to face this oppression. Within our hearts and minds, we need compassion that honors the lives and dignity of the millions of murdered indigenous people of America.
Most of us associate the holiday with happy pilgrims and Indians sitting down to a big feast, and that did happen once. The story began in 1614 when a band of English explorers sailed home to England with a ship full of Patuxet Indians bound for slavery. They left behind smallpox, which virtually wiped out those who escaped. By the time the Pilgrims arrived in Massachusetts Bay, they found only one living Patuxet Indian, a man named Squanto, who had survived slavery in England and knew their language. He taught them to grow corn and to fish, and negotiated a peace treaty between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag Nation. At the end of the first year, the Pilgrims held a great feast honoring Squanto and the Wampanoags. But as the word spread in England about the paradise to be found in the New World, religious zealots called the Puritans began arriving by the boatload. Finding no fences around the land, they considered it to be public domain. Joined by other British settlers, they seized land, capturing strong young natives for slaves and killing the rest. But the Pequot nation had not agreed to the peace treaty Squanto had negotiated, and they fought back. The Pequot War was one of the bloodiest Indian wars ever fought. In 1637, near present day, Groton, Connecticut, over 700 men, women, and children of the Pequot tribe had gathered for their annual Green Corn Festival, which is our Thanksgiving celebration. In the pre-dawn hours, the sleeping Indians were surrounded by the English and Dutch mercenaries, who ordered them to come outside. Those who came out were shot or clubbed to death, while terrified women and children who huddled inside the longhouse were burned alive. The next day, the governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony declared a day of Thanksgiving, because 700 unarmed men, women, and children had been murdered. Cheered by their victory, the brave colonists and their Indian allies attacked village after village. Women and children over 14 were sold into slavery, while the rest were murdered. Boats loaded with as many as 500 slaves regularly left the ports of New England. Bounties were paid for Indian scalps to encourage as many deaths as possible. Following an especially successful raid against the Pequot in what is now Stamford, Connecticut, the churches announced a second day of Thanksgiving to celebrate a victory over the heathen savages. During the feasting, the hacked-off heads of the natives were kicked through the streets like soccer balls. Even the friendly Wampanoag did not escape the madness. Their chief was beheaded and his head impaled on a pole in Plymouth, Massachusetts, where it remained on display for 24 years. The killings became more and more frenzied, with days of Thanksgiving feast being held after each successful massacre. George Washington finally suggested that only one day of Thanksgiving per year be set aside of celebrating each and every massacre. Later, Abraham Lincoln decreed Thanksgiving Day to be a national legal holiday during the Civil War. On the same day, he ordered troops to march against the starving Sioux in Minnesota. The story doesn't have quite the same fuzzy feeling associated with it as the one where the Indians and Pilgrims are all sitting down together at a big feast. But we need to learn our true history so it won't ever be repeated. This Thanksgiving, when you gather with your loved ones to thank your Creator for all your blessings, think about the people who only wanted to live their lives and raise their families. They also took time out to say thank you.